welcome back to Switch to Linux. We are going to continue our GIMP tutorials today, and what we're going to do today is start working with layers. Now, I had a very specific request, something to talk about, so it's going to be something we're going to start probably next week, and it's going to take a few weeks to do. But what we are going to do is walk through how to create a thumbnail for iTunes. So if you want to produce, in this case, if you want to produce an iPod or podcast, there it is. I knew that word was up there somewhere. If you want to produce a podcast, one of the things that you need to do in creating your podcast is you need to upload a image of very specific dimensions that they give you. And this is actually very important. A friend of mine was in radio management for a long time, and communications and broadcasting, and he runs a fairly successful podcast, and he says, people underestimate the power of that podcast image. And we are going to do that. We're not going to start it yet. Hopefully next week is when we will start talking about that in a little bit more detail. And I have another one I want to do as well. But the reason I didn't want to start it yet is because I wanted to get a few more of the basics down. We don't want to dive into a big project until you get some of those basics down. And so the layers are one of those big early basics that you really need to get figured out. And so what we're going to do is start working specifically with our layers today. We're going to introduce the various layer types, what they do, and what you can do with the layers and things like that. So with that being said, I'm just getting my camera here adjusted right. There we are. Let's go ahead and have a look at our desktop. Okay, so I've already started up GIMP here, and I have thrown on my desktop a couple of pictures, my cat picture we've been working with, and I have a GIMP logo image here that we're going to work with here as well. So I have my GIMP started up. Of course, I cut mine back in size a little bit so I can have my camera there. And so what we're going to do here is we'll look at our layers. So there is a menu item specifically dedicated to layers over here. Notice that we really can't do anything with this, and that's the reason for that is that there is absolutely no image on here yet. So I could open one of the images that I have picked, or I can just create a new image. All right. Also of note, there is the tool panel over here. So on the right side of my screen, up in the top, I have the layers thing selected. Of course, there is nothing in there because we don't have a file. So here, instead of opening a file like we've normally done, we'll just go ahead and create a new file. So come down here to File and New, or if you're a hotkey guy, hold Control, push N. And there are a series of templates in here. So these templates, and you can add to these. But you can basically pull out from one of these various templates. You can see here that these are various letter sizes. Toilet paper? There's a toilet paper template. I guess if you want to make Saddam's insane toilet paper, you can do that over here. But regardless, you'll see that these guys here are labeled as 300 DPI, which means that they are designed for printing. The other ones here, you can see web banner common, web banner huge. I don't know if 728 by 90 is huge by today's standards, but regardless, these ones here that are not labeled are probably closer to your 72 DPI. So we'll pull that in, and that's exactly what it is. I selected it, 1600. Remember, our DPI, if it's for web, then you want to pick a 72. If it's for print, you want to pick a 300. So you can see here, and then our advanced options will tell us our more advanced DPIs, which you actually can change, but for most intents and purposes, you want them to be the same. It will cause some weird things if you don't know what you're doing in that. You also have the ability to pick, is it RGB, color, or black and white, grayscale. And then you can pick with the foreground color, which is over here. If you notice under my tool panel on the left, you see the black here and the white here. This is your foreground and your background, which can be swapped around like this. So I could change my foreground colors or whatever. Let me just pick one of these. Okay, so I could swap these. So right now the foreground is yellow, the background is the black, and here swapping it, the black is now the foreground, the yellow is the background. So when it says fill with, the foreground color would be black, the background color here would be yellow. You can pick a flat white, or you can go with transparent. Okay. So it doesn't really matter if you already know exactly what you want to do. You might want to start with the basic color, whether it's black, whether it's white, some other color, or basic transparent. I'll go ahead and pick transparent this time. And what you'll see when we get this is that it is going to give us this, this large image. Now, you can use some hotkeys here to scroll up and down. If you're using GIMP on a regular basis, you want to learn the hotkeys because your life will go a whole lot better. And this is slightly different from Photoshop. Holding the Control key and just scrolling the mouse wheel, you can see here that it is going to scale this image up or down. And this is just adjusts the view. So this is not making the image bigger or smaller. This just adjusts how you see the image. Okay, so I like getting it so I have just enough background there. I guess this would probably work as well. It's just so close to the edge that I feel like part of it's cut off, but it's not. I can see my dotted line on either end. So we'll go ahead and stick with that one. Okay, so now that we have our image here and we have one background layer. Now, there is an option here if we flatten the image. Of course, it flattens to the background color, which is this horrible yellow. I'm just going to go ahead and change this to black. I'll talk about how I just did that later. I'll just use the paint bucket with the foreground color. So right now what we have is you cannot adjust this thing as various layer items because it's considered the background. Now, I think you have a few more options with this than you would on Photoshop, for example. On Photoshop, the background is just a background layer. You really can't do much. To do anything with it, you really generally have to convert it into a layer. What you can do from here, you can duplicate this as a layer. I don't believe there's actually a convert to layer like there is. But you can go ahead and just duplicate it, or you can do a new layer from the visible. So these are some of the options. Let's go ahead and duplicate this. And what I can do here, if I want to get this kind of converted back to how it is I can add a transparency layer. So by default, your background does not have a transparency layer. Although you can actually make it transparent, your backgrounds do not generally have that. So here is, over here in the right here, we have this eyeball here. This is visible and hidden. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to swap these colors, and we'll add this ugly yellow back to this. So if I change this eyeball here, I can show or hide this layer. You can see the black ones because it's behind the yellow one. We can't change it. Now, the next thing, though, we can do is we can adjust the opacity of the layer. So you'll see here as I adjust the opacity of the layer, you get this one here, which will go more slowly. If you grab the full arrow here, you can drag it a whole lot faster. What this is doing is adjusting the opacity of the currently selected layer. Okay? And so what you can see here is this alpha channel. That's what this is, which does not appear to actually do anything, but what it is it's supposed to add this ability to adjust the opacity. But I can adjust the opacity no matter what. All right, let's go ahead and just get rid of this layer. So right-clicking the layer in this, this toolbar here will give you essentially the same options that you have by selecting the layer menu here. Okay, so we're just going to delete this layer. And I kind of want to convert this back to transparent. Maybe what I'll actually end up doing is just delete this layer as well. And this gets back to an image that exists, but there's no layers in it. So to add just a basic new layer, I can come up here and hit New Layer. I might be able to right-click over here and see the new layer from right here. And then what you want to pick is you want to adjust the size. So by default, you are going to have the layer will be the size of the canvas. Now, this is something that is different from in Photoshop, because in Photoshop, the layers are always the size of the canvas. But in this case, I can actually set the layer to be a different size. And then again, I can pick, do I want foreground, background, white, or transparency? And generally, the default on this, I believe, is set to transparency. So you'll see here that it will adjust it and it will place it in the upper corner up there. That's kind of what you want to do to adjust your layer. Now, if you want to make adjustments, you can set your layer boundary size here. And your layer boundary size will allow you to make adjustments to where the layer is at. So if I want to maybe cut this down in size, maybe if I want to go down to 1200 by, let's do 750, and I push the center button. Now the center here, this does not center in the frame of the canvas, it centers it in the frame of where the current image is at. So if I push resize, you'll see that it's not centered to the canvas, it is centered to this location. As far as how to center this layer specifically to the canvas, I'm not exactly sure how I would actually do that. Let's see, I was looking for that. I did not spot that. What I would actually do is place the content that I want in this layer, and then what I would do is I would just move it using the move function, which does not allow you to move a blank layer. Okay, so what we're going to do next is we'll talk about opening an image as a layer. So if you go into your File menu, you can open as a layer. And what I'm going to do is go to the desktop, and I'm going to open my GIMP logo here as a layer. So opening this up as a layer, you can see that it drops down here as a layer. Just grab my move button over here. And you'll see that I have the ability to move it around, but you'll also see that the size of the layer is actually the size of the image, not the size of the canvas. If I needed this larger, I can just come over here, right click, and scale the layer to the image size, and that would make the layer the size. Doesn't matter a whole lot depending on what your purpose is for this, but that's what you would do. Now, another thing that will trip up the people coming to GIMP from Photoshop is that suppose I want to copy this layer here. So what I'll do is suppose I want to copy this and I want to make some adjustment to it. I'm going to open the document up instead. And as we open it, you'll see that it will open as a new file. So you'll see the image up there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab as much of this as I possibly can, or maybe I'll grab everything but it. Okay, yep, that's easier. Grab everything except it. Then I'm going to invert the selection. Control I will invert your selection. And I will copy it. Now, as we come back over here, I'm going to hide our old layer. Actually, I'm just going to delete our old layer. If I paste it, what you'll notice is that in Photoshop, this is going to paste as a layer. This does not paste as a layer. This is a floating selection, okay? It says pasted layer. So I can move this around where I want it. I cannot do a lot of other things with it. So the people coming from Photoshop that want to drop this in and then manipulate it right away, it's like it won't work. Well, the reason is now that you kind of put it where you want, then what you need to do is you need to make this a layer by coming up. I want to right click this and I want to say to new layer. And then you'll see now it says pasted layer. Okay, so now I can make any adjustments, move it around, colorize it, whatever I want to do. Again, you can, just like other programs, you can actually come over here, double click on the title and give it a name. So we'll say GIMP layer. Let's go ahead and delete this one. Now we'll discard the old layer as well. Now we're going to open as a layer our cat image. So you'll see that our cat image will actually cover our GIMP layer. So just like you would expect, you can drag and drop your layers. You do have the option here to, let's see, where's it at? Is it here? I think it's actually only over here. In the layer menu, you can stack them by inverting the stack. So you can raise them, you can lower them, or you can reverse the layer order. All right. Now you can also just drag your layers and drag them wherever you want them to go. So you have the option to drag your layers. One of the things here, there we go. Go ahead and make the cat a dog there by adding the GIMP to her head. Now suppose I want to copy this. Again, as intuitive as you can imagine, right click and then you can duplicate the layer. And I'm going to call this GIMP reverse, because what we're going to do with this layer is we're going to invert it. So I'm going to come over here into my layer and transform, and I'm going to flip it horizontally. Now there is a scale option which will scale to the current selected layer. Let's just go ahead and scale the layer itself. Just going to cut the layer scale in half. Every now and again, that thing does not want to scale for me. I'm not quite exactly sure why. I want to scale that a little bit differently. So notice that you can scale the image or you can scale the layer. They essentially do the same thing. There we go. Now I have two GIMP cats fighting each other. Okay, so there is your layers. I'll look into why that thing was not scaling for me there in a moment. All right, so the other things, of course, you can do with your layers. Let's see. Here's masks. You can add layer masks. Of course, our transparency. Crop to selection. Yeah, crop to selection is another one you can do. So you can grab your select tool. And now here you can crop your image to selection, or you can crop just your layer to selection. So notice what that does is we had the reverse GIMP cropped out, so you'll see that that's actually what it cut out. I don't want to do that. Suppose I want to cut the cat image down. Again, whatever layer is selected, it's going to crop down to. All right, let's see. Anything else? It looks like that is what is up with all of our layers. Of course, any individual layer, again, we can adjust the opacity. Like that. I guess, no, there is something else I want to talk about. The next thing I would like to talk about is, we'll just kind of introduce this a little bit, but just how filters work on this. So, of course, GIMP out of the box, I think there's plugins for it. I'll have to look into it. But out of the box, it does not have the same layer property tools that Photoshop has. And Krita does have it, and that was something that kind of interested me about Krita, except, you know, GIMP's text options work, and that's more important than layer properties. But suppose I want to add a drop shadow to this particular layer. So make sure that you select the layer that you want, and then up here into filters. Again, we'll cover filters in more detail another time. But here I can do my drop shadows. Now, you'll see that it does have a drop shadow, but what drop shadows do in this is it adds another layer directly under it. And so you'll see that that's what it looks like. So if I actually move this guy around, it does not necessarily take that shadow with me. So if you are wanting to apply a drop shadow effect, first add it, and then what you want to do is there's a merge down property. So we can flatten the whole image, we can merge the visible layers, or what we can do is merge down. What merge down does is it takes the two layers that are on top of each other and stacks them together as one layer. So right now that's GIMP, and the layer that's directly on top of it is the drop shadow. So merge down is going to create one layer that is the GIMP with its drop shadow, like that. Of course, it'll retain the final image, the name of the bottom layer. Now, if you're not ready to completely merge that yet, there is another way to do that, and that is by locking the two layers together. If I can remember exactly how to lock the two layers together. There we are. So locking the two layers together, what you're going to do is over here, next to the eye, there is a lock together. So now if I move one, it will move the other layer, but it will retain them as being separate layers. So if you're not ready for sure, if you don't know for sure if that's the way you want, or maybe you just need to play with how the drop shadow looks, maybe adjusting the opacity like this, you can make that adjustment, still being able to move it around without actually locking the layers completely together. So that's what you can do, is lock those individual layers together. All right. Now, of course, the downside is everything that's going to be locked is going to be locked together. So keep that in mind. All right. Let's see. So there's new layer from what's visible. The new layer from what's visible, what this is going to do is, if I do that option, new layer from visible, then what we get is one layer which contains everything that was visible at that point in time, but not the other layers. Okay. So that's what that one does. I think that is everything for there. So I'm going to figure out what was going on with my scaling and hopefully be back in a second. So what I was attempting to show earlier, I'm not sure exactly what happened. I didn't really do anything different. I just came down here, just click on the layer that you have selected with the scale tool. And what you can do is you can, if you know the size you want, just list those up there, or you can grab one of these guys. Now, you can stretch it, but if you hold the control key as you are dragging it, it will maintain the aspect ratio. So then that's how you do that. You'll notice, of course, I made that larger than I should have, and so it pixelated it quite a bit. Now, the last thing actually I realized I did not talk about is your layer masks. So let's have a quick look at what a mask does. So, and I can probably cover this in a lot more detail later, but it is in the layer menu here. But what a mask is going to do is it will allow you to let some things of an image show through, but not other things. And so you can pick different types of masks, transparencies, selections, colors, channels. What I'll do here is doing a black mask. Then what this is going to mean is it's going to add a black mask over top of this. And anything that is black will not show through. So you can right click, and you'll see that Edit Layer Mask is the available option here. And what this means is that you will have the ability to adjust this. Anything that you do is adjusting the layer mask, not the layer itself. Now, Show Layer Mask will show you what you actually have. And so if I come up here and I want to grab maybe like a, let's see, you might be able to do text over this. I have no idea if you can do text over this or not. But what you want to do is, since we have the black mask, it's going to take the differential between the black and whatever color is laying on top of it, and that will actually show up. In some programs, you can actually do text as a layer. Let's see. As a layer, or as a mask, I should say. And then we'll go back, highlight all that text. Do that. So yeah, that actually does not actually show up on your mask. That was just an experimental. I didn't even think that would work or not. I'm sure it's possible to do that. It's just not something that was there. Anyway, what I should be doing here is just grabbing, grab the airbrush tool here. And then if I come over here and just do some painting, you'll see that it's just going to add some painting to this. Now, if I right-click and stop showing the layer mask, you see what comes through is wherever the dots happen to be. So there's a cat right about here. So now I can actually paint this and just show up just the cat. Okay, so this way what the mask is going to do is it's going to show just the differential. So if I pick something like maybe a gray color and I painted gray over this, you'll see that it's giving me a little bit of the cat showing through, but it's mostly transparent like it's been through a transparency filter. Okay, but if I grab back to my white again, I can now bring the cat back. Of course, if I made a mistake somewhere, I can paint back over this in black anywhere else I'd like to re-hide. So maybe what I'll do here is just paint everything over in solid black again. So that's kind of the basic concept behind a layer mask. We'll cover a lot more about the things you can do with layer masks in another tutorial here. There's a whole lot of things you can do with them. But regardless, there is about all the basics on your layers. So thanks for watching, everybody. It's been great working with you, and I think starting next week we have enough information where we can start thinking about how you can do some other more advanced image editing, such as doing the iTunes logos or maybe other things like that. So thanks for watching, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux. Once again, if you would like to help the channel out, you can find me on Patreon, patreon.com/TomM, or you can use the Amazon link in the comments below. So check out those options, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.